Okay, in this first problem, they really are setting up a situation for proportions, and we can look at the problem just glancing through and notice that we have a beginning at 7 p.m. looking due north, and at 7:45 they had rotated 180 degrees. So what we have here, we can say due north, we were at 7 o'clock, but then we rotated 180 degrees and in the length of time of 45 minutes. Now this wants us to find out how many degrees will the restaurant rotate in 1 hour. Well, we know in 45 minutes the restaurant had rotated 180 degrees, so the rate's not changing, so we can set up a proportion and say, well, after 60 minutes, what is the rotation going to be? And from here, to solve a proportion, you cross multiply. So I'm going to have 45x equals 60 times 180. And then finally, to solve for x, you would need to divide both sides by 45. So you have 60 times 180, and all of that is divided by 45. And when you do all of the calculator work here, you should get answer choice C. Okay, moving on to number 2. The cost of a gym membership is a one-time fee of $140. So we know no matter what, we have at least a one-time fee of $140 and plus a monthly fee of $40. Brendan wrote a $500 check to pay for his gym membership for a certain number of months. So that's probably what we're going to be trying to find, including the one-time fee. So how many months of membership did he pay for? So we can set up an equation and say 140 plus $40 times X number of months is equal to the amount of the check that he wrote. And so here we would have 40x is equal to 500 minus 140, so 360. And then finally, we would need to divide both sides by 40. So we would have 360 divided by 40. And when you do all of that, you should get answer choice H. Okay, moving on to the next problem. Here, let's see, a museum offers a 2-hour guided tour for groups with fewer than 25 people at a cost of $9.25 per person. For groups with 25 people or more, the cost is $8.50 per person. The 27 people in the 9 a.m. tour group paid $9.25 in advance. What is the total refund? So that's kind of important, refund, that the museum owes the 9 a.m. group. So we have 27 people, so 27 times, and let's see, the 27 people in the 9 a.m. tour group each paid $9.25. And so when we multiply this, you should get $249.75. And we need to multiply really what they should have paid, which is $8.50. And that's going to give us $229.50. And really the refund would be the difference in these two. So I'm going to take these two numbers and I'm going to subtract them. And so that's going to give us $20.25. So the correct answer choice here should be D. Okay, moving on to number 4. And let's read through the problem. It looks like we've got a maybe a probability problem. We have a 13-member math club needs to choose a student government representative. They decide that the representative who will be chosen at random cannot So absolutely cannot be any of the 3 officers of the club. What is the probability that this person, who is a member of the club but not an officer? So if we have 13 members in our club, but we're going to remove the 3, so that means we have 10 people to choose from. So our sample set is 10, and Samara is one of the 10, so her probability of being chosen is 1/10, which is answer choice H. Okay, and number 5, Mel earned scores of, and you can read the numbers, and notice it gives us a total of 429, so that's pretty good, on 5 tests. And Econ 2, solving which of the following equations for S gives the score he needs to earn on the 6th test to average exactly 85 points for all 6 tests. So notice he's already taken 5 tests. Now remember, to find an average, you add up all that you have and divide by the number that you have. So they've already added the first 5 scores. So I know 429, but we need to add in that 6th test. So I think they want us to let that be S. And if we add up all the tests that we have and divide by the number that we have, that should generate an 85. And so it looks like the correct answer choice here will be D. Okay, moving on to number 6. Here, the figure shows a quadrilateral, ABCD. What is the measure of angle C? So the idea with a quadrilateral is the sum of all the angles in a quadrilateral have to add to be 360. Now, a good way to remember that, and I'm going to try to connect angles B and D. The reason why it is 360 is because you actually have 2 triangles here. So what we could do is add up all 3 angles that we have and then subtract from 360. And if we do that, if we add up our angles, notice we would have 100, and we would have 65 and 75. And when we add all those together, it looks like we're going to get 240. And then 360 minus 240 is going to leave us with 120 degrees. So angle C has to be answer choice F. Okay, and looks like the next question has even more triangles. And let's see, in the figure below, we have triangle ABC and DEF are similar triangles. Now what that means for them to be similar, that means that the length for AB and DE should correspond. So the length for AB should correspond to DE. And notice we're missing DE. But if we look at the relationship with our other sides, let's look at BC to EF, BC, and let's change colors to see this, BC to EF, and notice then the remaining side, so it looks like it's a 2-to-1 relationship. So that means that my missing side here is going to have to be 3. And it wants to know, well, what is the perimeter of DEF? And if we add these, we get 3 plus 3 plus 5, which is going to give us 11. So answer choice C. Okay, now moving on to number 8. And number 8 is a problem that is missed quite a bit with students. When you see absolute value bars, you know to make things positive, but you only make the final answer once you are finished working on the inside. Then you make that positive. Don't make anything positive until you finish the inside. So inside I have -6 plus 4, which is going to be the absolute value of -2, which is 2. So the right answer here is G. But do remember, do not change the sign of anything until this final step here. That's where you make things positive. Okay, so for number 9, what are the values for x that satisfy the equation x plus a times x plus b equals 0? Notice we're looking for the values of x, and if we have two things multiplied together and their product is 0, then either one of the two things had to be equal to 0. So the same idea here, we're going to set both parts equal to 0 because one of the two had to be 0. And if we solve the top equation, we get negative a. And over here, this other equation, we get negative b. So let's see. That's going to give us answer choice A. Okay, and then our next question, number 10, and students usually get really bogged down with these types of problems, and I understand. Whenever you read through the problem, you see that it's asking you to figure out which of the following angles or minor arcs has the greatest degree measure. So let's take our answer choices and see if we can find out. So we need to find arc LM. So arc LM is here. And the measure of this arc, notice through here, we're greater than 90 degrees. So I know that this arc here is greater than 90 degrees. So let's look at arc MK. So, and I'm going to swap colors to see. Arc MK, so this arc here, that's less than 90. So that can't be correct. Because if something's less than 90, then it's certainly not going to be bigger than something larger than 90. So what about angle JMG? So again, I'm going to swap colors. And let's look for angle JMG. So JM and then G here. Well, that looks pretty close to 90. I wouldn't say that it's more than 90, but it is very close to 90. So that's still not going to be larger than 90 degrees. So let's get rid of that one. And then let's see, angle LHK, LHK. And again, here we are still smaller than 90. And MJL, you'll notice the same. So the correct answer here is F. Okay, and notice on that problem we did not have to find the exact measure. We just had to put it all in relation to each other and pick out the largest. And a lot of times with these problems, you can do that without actually knowing what the exact value is. You can reason your way to an answer. So for number 11, points B and C lie on AD, so they've drawn that out for us. The length of AD is 30 units. So I know this entire length from here all the way out to here is 30 units. The length of AC is 16 units. So from A all the way out to C is 16 units. And BD, B to D, is, let's see, from here to here, B to D is 20 units. So how many units long, if it can be determined, is BC? Well, a couple of things you could do with that. One way to figure this out is if you know from here, I would use, let me change colors, make it a little easier to see. If I know here to here is 16, but then I know from B all the way out to D is 20, well, we would be very tempted to say, oh, well, that's got to be 4. But notice we are overlapping some, and we don't really know if that's going to be the case or not. So I would be careful with that. That's where a lot of students tend to mess up. What else could we possibly do? Well, let's see, we know the whole thing is 30. We know from B to D is 20. And we could look at the difference of those two and know that from A to B then, from A to B, well that's, gosh, let's see, if all of that's 30 and B to D is 20, so A to B would have to be 10, right? And then I know then BC would have to be 6. So be careful, the most common mistake would be for students to subtract from AC and then BD, but you have to be careful there. That's kind of a misleading way to do that. Okay, moving on to number 12. Number 12 is a good old algebra problem. So let's see. We're solving for x. Now, if you don't remember how to solve these, you're looking for an x value. You can take your answer choices and plug in and make sure which answer choice is going to give you the same value on both sides of the equal sign. Sometimes that is faster than the algebra approach, but in some of the problems it gets to be a little more hectic. It might be easier just to go ahead and do the algebra. So notice I've done the distributive property, and we do need to move this 8x over, so that's going to give me 4x. To change the sign, to change the side. And here it looks like x is going to be negative 20. So this was a great case where the algebra was a little bit easier than the actual plugging in. Okay, in this problem, we're going to have to work with area and surface area. And then the area of a square or a rectangle. Of a square is side times side, which really is the area of a rectangle, which is length times width. And then we also talk about surface area, which is length times width times height. So we have all of that for this particular problem. And notice here that Ken used a piece of cardboard large enough to allow for the cardboard to extend 2 inches beyond the cake on all sides. Make sure you notice it says all sides because that's where this problem is usually missed. What is the area in square inches of the aluminum foil that is exposed? So it's not really wanting the exact area of the cardboard that was used or the cake. It's wanting this area out here, this exposed. So what we'll need to do is actually find the area of the cardboard and find the area of the cake and then subtract the two to get that outside area. So the area of the cardboard, remember it's extended 2 on each side. So let's see, if we extend 2 on each side, what is that going to give us for the cardboard? Well, we have 12, and then we have to add 2 and add 2 for that corner, so that's going to give us 14, 15, 16, and then times, and then the other direction we have 16, right? But then we're going to have 16 and then added 2 and 2 again, so that's going to be 16. That's going to be 20. So 16 by 20, that area is going to be 320. And now for the area of the cake, which is going to be 12 times 16, well, that area of the cake is going to be 192. And now if we look for the difference in the two, that's going to give us 128. So that's going to be answer choice E. Alright, so for number 16, what is the y-intercept of the line in standard form that goes through these 2 points? So we always start thinking about all these different formulas, but let's plot this for a minute and see if we can't reason our way through it. And most of these you should be able to. So notice if we plot this first point, we're going back 3. So here we have negative 3, and we're going up 6. And so I'm going to note those values. and then we're going out positive 3, and then we're going up 2. And so let's think about this. Is the y-intercept of the line containing those 2 points? So my y value has to be somewhere between 6 and 2. So which answer choice is between 6 and 2? Well, it's going to have to be H. So we made that problem a little bit easier, and always try that first, especially on the ACT. Okay, so for our next problem, we can read through, and notice if we skim through and then get to the actual question, it wants to know, well, what is the distance in inches between these 2 holes? So I need this distance here, from here to here. So we will need to add 2 1/16 plus 4 3/4. So we have to get a common denominator. So the common denominator is 16. So 3 over 4 is going to be the same thing as 12 over 16. Remember, what you multiply to 4 to get 16, you have to multiply the same amount to 3 to get 12. And so when we add these, we're going to get 6 and 13 over 16. And we know that entire length is 11 5/8. Again, that 5/8 is going to have to talk about parts of 16. So if I multiply 8, I'm going to have to multiply by 2 to get 16. So multiply the 5 by the same amount, and I'm subtracting 6 and 3/16. Now, of course, your calculators can do all of this, but if you don't know how to make the calculator do that, well, you're going to have to do it this way. Now, we can't subtract here. Let's see, what are we going to end up with? We've got, let's see, 13. So we can't subtract these 2. So I'm going to have to borrow 1 from 11, make that 10. And then a quick way here, because we are adding 1, 10 plus 16 is 26. So let's subtract this. So 26 minus 13 is 13 over 16. And even if you didn't want to finish the problem, notice 13 over 16 when I do the subtraction. So it's got to be answer choice D. And if we did finish, you would see we would get 4 and 13/16. Okay, moving on to the next problem. Okay, in number 18, you're told that you have a pond, and the depth of that pond is decreasing at 1 centimeter per week. Now, we need to notice that we are starting at 180 centimeters, and then we are decreasing 1 centimeter per week. So we need to try to write some kind of equation that would model this. If we're starting at 180, and then we are decreasing 1 centimeter per week, so 1x or just x would be fine. And then our second pond is starting at 160 centimeters, and the depth of the pond is 160, and it is decreasing 1/2 centimeter per week. And we want to know, well, when will these 2 ponds be at the same depth? So we can set these 2 equations equal to each other. So we have 180 minus x is equal to 160 minus 1/2 x. And if we solve this equation, I'm going to subtract 160 over and have 20, and then add x over, and I have 1/2 x, and multiply both sides by 2, and notice that we end up with x to be 40. So 40 weeks should be the correct answer. So that's going to be answer choice H. Okay, moving on to number 19. Number 19 asks us if we graph all of our answer choices given, which would not be a line. So that means we're looking for something that would not be linear. And if we have linear equations, that means the highest exponent I see for x and y is 1. So your exponent can only be a 1. And if we look through all of our answer choices, we would see answer choice E. The x value has an exponent greater than 1. So that one would not be a line when it's graphed. Okay, so for number 20, we have to remember all of our different trig values. And notice we are looking from the point of view of A. So from A's point of view, this would be the side opposite. This would be the side adjacent. And this would be, of course, your hypotenuse. And then we have to remember Sohcahtoa. So we have something that looks like this. So that's going to be sine is opposite over hypotenuse, cosine adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is going to be opposite over adjacent. So that's why we call this Sohcahtoa. And so let's look over at A, and let's try to see, well, which of these answer choices is true. So it's saying from cosine of A, remember cosine has to be adjacent over hypotenuse. So if that's the case, then we should have 5 over 13, and we don't. So let's look at G. Sine of A is 12 over 13. And notice that does fit. That's going to be opposite over hypotenuse, so there's my correct answer. It is G. Now number 21, looking at 21, and this is okay, and so notice in this problem we have a water fountain that is located halfway between points B and D. So let's connect points B and D. And I know somewhere in this vicinity, somewhere halfway between, well, let's see, we know the whole thing is 12. We know this portion is 3, so the length of that has to be 9. And so halfway between that is going to be right at 4.5, isn't it? And so I would look at my answer choices, because you've got to go 4.5 north. So because we are trying to get there from point A. So let's get rid of A and C and E. So now we're trying, again, from point A, we're trying to get here to the water fountain. Well, let's look at, we need to go either 5 blocks east or 8.5 blocks east. Well, we know we've got to travel this direction. We're going east. Well, it looks like, well, if this portion here up to here is 7, we're definitely going to have to go more than 5 blocks. So I think D is probably going to. Right, moving on to number 22. We have a terrible looking equation here to work with. And notice it tells us that this equation is the braking distance. And so we want to know, as we skim through here, how fast can, let's see, Damien be driving so that the braking distance is less than or equal to 150 feet. So we know this is going to be our Y value. So we need to plug that in and solve for X. And so we have 150 equals 3 times x squared plus 10x. And that's all over 40. And let's see, going through here, we would need to multiply both sides by 40. So we have 150 times 40 is going to be equal 3 times x squared plus 10x. And I would not distribute the 3. Let's divide it over. So let's divide both sides by 3. And we can go ahead and do some of the calculator work here. And I wouldn't do a tremendous amount. You have 150 times 40 divided by 3. So that's going to give you 2,000 equals x squared plus 10x. Now from here you've got a couple of options. I would plug in my answer choices. I would go through and see, well, what's going to make the most sense when I plug in. And I would start right in the middle and see how that works. So what I would do is plug in 40 because it's right in the middle and see what happens. So when I say plug in, it's going to be 40 squared. So I'm trying to see, well, does 2,000 equal 40 squared plus 10 times 40? And if it doesn't, if it's too big or too small, then you know to try F and G or J and K. Now this one, it works out nice and neat because 40 squared, that's going to be 1,600 plus 10 times 40 is 400. And so we have our right answer here in the middle already. But as far as finishing solving and trying to go through a factoring situation, I would not do that. I would go through, after I had my equation down to this point, I would go plug in. Okay, in 23, another plug-in problem. So G at 4, so that notation might look strange to some folks. G at 4 just means we're going to go to this function G and replace x with 4. And notice G at 4 ends up being 2. And then F at 1, same situation, go to the function F and plug in 1. So I have 1 squared plus 1 plus 5. Oops, forgot my plus sign. And notice that's going to be 7. So the value of G of 4 over the value of F at 1 is going to be 2 over 7. So that gives us answer choice A. Alright, so 24. At a school picnic, one junior and one senior will be selected to lead the activities. If there are 125 juniors and 100 seniors at the picnic, how many different two-person combinations of one junior and one senior are possible? So this is your fundamental counting principle, which means you're really just going to multiply the number of juniors and the number of seniors together. And that's going to give you all your different possibilities. So here your correct answer choice is K. And number 25, you have a scatter plot, and it wants to know really what equation would best fit this particular line. So the first thing I would notice that is the line has a negative slope, and I'm going to be looking at y equals mx plus b, and m, that's your slope. So if I have to have a negative slope, that means this coefficient here in front of x has to be negative. Well, that eliminates answer choices D and E. And then I would also try to see, well, let's look at this number up here. This is your Y-intercept, which is this number here. So if that's your Y-intercept, then you know that that last number has to be a 10. So that gets rid of answer choice A. So now you're left with trying to figure out the slope for this particular line. And something you might could look at here, this between 3 and 5, you're almost to 3.5. So let's say that our slope is also rise over run, and so our y's over our x's. So notice my y's changed by a value of negative 10. And let's just estimate here, I went out this direction. Now, whatever I have, our y's, changing y's over changing x's, well, it looks almost like, well, if I go out all the way to 3.5, let's say 3.4, so changing y's over changing x's, well, what is that going to end up being for us? So we know it's going to be negative, so I don't really care about the negative so much anymore. Over, well, 3.4, isn't that 34 over 10, isn't it? And if we continue on with this, let's see, that's going to give us 10 divided by 34 over 10, which is really, let's see, let's flip over 34. So that's going to give us 100 over 34, And if we divide that, notice that we will get a 3 point something. So after all of that mess here, and we could have eyeballed and really figured out that we're going to end up with answer choice B. But again, if you want a for sure very close estimate, here's what you can do to get that estimate. Okay, moving on. And this is going to be setting up some kind of linear, absolute value linear inequality. And so if these values inside here have to stay less than or equal to 30, we can set up an equation. So t minus 24, and notice I've dropped the absolute value, is less than or equal to 30. But since I'm taking the absolute value and I'm wanting something to stay between 30, then I have to consider the negative values, which are going to be all of the other values that are bigger than negative 30. And to find the range here, I'm just going to add 24 to both ends, because both ends, that's going to be what we're trying to find is the range. And if we add 24 to both sides, notice that we end up here. Let's see, if I add 24 over here, I get negative 6 is less than or equal to, t is less than or equal to, and then 54. So notice the smallest number I can get is negative 6, and the biggest number I can get is 54. And so the correct answer here, let's see, negative 10 is smaller than negative 6, so F. That's one way to do it. That's the algebra. Now, if you wanted a different way, you can plug in your answer choices and see if you get a true statement. So let's take our answer choice F and see what that means. If I take the absolute value and let's let t equal negative 10 minus 24, is that less than 30? Now don't make this inside stuff positive until you've combined it all. Now that you can combine it and get negative 34, now you make that positive, and notice 34 is not smaller than 30, so there's another way, and that might be the easier way, especially if you don't remember all this garbage over here. Okay, moving on to 27, and let's read through that one. If 5 times a number n is subtracted from 15, so I have 15 minus 5 times a number, the result is negative. Which of the following gives the possible values for n? Well, let's look at the values. Well, if I plug in 0, that's not going to give me a negative, right? So all the possible values, and I wanted my answer to be negative, so yeah, it's not going to be that. If we plug in 3, well, if I plug in 3, I get 0. 0 is not negative or positive. If I plug in 10, I do get a negative, but I'm pretty sure I could plug in 11 and 12 and 13. So C is tempting, but it's still not going to be the right choice. And let's look at D and E. N has to be bigger than 3. So let's test this out and see. 15 minus 5, a number bigger than 3 would be 4. Yep, that's going to be negative if I plugged in a 5 or a 6. So my right answer should be D. Okay, number 28 is a lot of factoring. And what this is saying is that for all x values larger than 21, what is this going to be equal to? And this seems kind of strange kind of problem. To me, the way it's asked, I would almost think it would be either F or G, just by the way the question's asked, but it could be completely wrong. This one you're just going to have to work out. So let's see if we can't factor. And so let's start out with this portion here in our factoring. And so x squared plus 8x plus 7. So we're going to break this into 2 parentheses. And of course we still have our x minus 3 that I'm just going to bring down. To get x squared, we do x and x. And then you have to ask yourself, what can I multiply that gives me 7, add, and get 8? Well, 7 and 1, positive 7, positive 1. Right? And so same process in the bottom. However, when I do my two parentheses, notice I've got a little bit of a sign difference. I'm going to put this x plus 1 here. So again, still x and x. Now this time, what can I multiply that gives me 21? But now I need to subtract them because that's a minus sign and get 4. And it's a positive 4, so we need a positive 7 and a positive or a negative 3. Now notice what we've factored and got. We have the same exact things on top and bottom. We have x plus 7 and an x plus 7, x plus 1, x plus 1. Notice all of that's the same, so it's the same value top and bottom. So my answer is F. It's going to be 1. All of that reduces down to 1. It's the same idea as if you had 5 over 5 or 7 over 7 or even smiley face over smiley face. It's all going to reduce down to be a 1. Okay, looking at 29. Number 29, I hate problems like this that are so long on a testing process because you only have a minute to get through these problems. A minute per problem, a total of 60 minutes. I would skim through, and you have the median of a set of data containing 9 items. And let's see, 4 items were added to the set. All right. So in that 4, it has 2 were greater and 2 were less. So which of the following statements must be true? Well, you're going to have the same median. If you've only added 2 above and 2 below, your median is your middle number. So that middle number did not change. All right, and number 30. Number 30, the figure below shows 2 tangent circles such that the 10 centimeter diameter of the smaller circle is equal to the radius of the larger circle. What is the area of the shaded region? So we need the area of the big and subtract from it the area of the small. So we're going to take the area of the big circle and subtract, excuse my bell, the area of the small. So the area of a circle is pi r squared. And so let's go ahead and find the area of the big circle. Well, this is our radius. So the area of the big is going to be pi times r squared. So that's 100 pi. And so that's everything. That's all of it. And now I need to get the smaller portion, this area here, and subtract it. So the radius here is just 5. So the area of the small is going to be pi times 5 squared, which is not 10 but 25 pi. And if we subtract those two, it looks like we're going to get 75 pi. That's going to be the value of the larger, or the shaded area, sorry. All right, and finally 31. The sign of A is positive, the sign of B is negative. If it can be determined, what is the sign of the mean? Now, mean means average. In other words, if I took A, gotta get my marker back. If I took A and added B and divided by 2, what's the sign of that? Well, we don't know. We don't know. So there's no way for us to be able to tell with that given information. We don't know which of the two is larger. We don't know what the sign would be. So here for 31, the answer is E.